Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Emotionally Intelligent Entrepreneur. It is my pleasure to welcome Deborah Westcott. Deborah Westcott is the founder and CEO of coachEQ, an emotional intelligence training, coaching, and consulting organization. coachEQ specializes in transforming both people and companies by applying the core principles of emotional intelligence to executive leadership teams, directors, managers, and the hiring process. Through a custom blend of group training sessions, 360-degree assessments, one-on-one coaching, and HR consulting, Deborah has revitalized organizations both large and small, including the City of Fort Collins, Trinity Health, Telecare, Triple Crown Sports, and many more. So welcome, Deborah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So Deborah, I'm curious, what is the largest problem that you see entrepreneurs face? And is there anything about emotional intelligence that you find is particularly important for entrepreneurs?
I would say there's a couple. I would say the one that is obvious is entrepreneurs / solopreneurs, right, are oftentimes isolated.
Yeah.
They're in their own home or in their office building their own business. And what any entrepreneur needs is relationships and connection. So a large part of emotional intelligence is learning how to build those relationships. Because I know as an entrepreneur that those relationships are what launched and then continue to support my business.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You need those connections.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The second one would be if I'm my own boss and I'm my own workers, right? If I'm the one doing, then I might not slow down enough to actually sit, to be mindful in my process. And to sit inside myself and really experience what I'm actually going through, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, because entrepreneurs move pretty fast in my humble estimation.
Yeah, yeah. You need kind of a seatbelt. We're on such a roller coaster, and we're dependent on ourselves, sometimes too much so. So I tend to see emotional intelligence as a very broad umbrella. And governing all types of emotions. So one of the things that comes to mind is how much trouble people have delegating, for example. And in my opinion, delegating is being able to delegate is a piece of emotional intelligence. It's the emotions that keep us from doing it when we need to do it.
Right, because we're afraid, right? Or we're anxious, or control is a big piece. And
exactly.
How do I step through all that and let those things go? I can't step through all that, Audrey, unless I'm aware, right? Unless I know personally that it's going on inside me, or it will stop me. So that daily journal or that daily meditation time, even if it's just 5 minutes, will help me figure out what's in my way, so that I can then step through it, and so that I can let go.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very hard to see what's holding us back because it feels so real to us that it seems like we don't have a choice. You know, like it's not emotions that are holding us back from delegating. It's, oh, nobody can do the job as good as I can, or who would I delegate it to, or it'll take me more time to teach somebody than it will to just do it myself. We make all these reasons that are really just excuses because we're afraid.
And so we have the feeling and then we have the thoughts, right? So if I feel anxious and I feel scared, then what's going to happen is what you're talking about. I won't trust anybody, to be a part of. And as an entrepreneur, it's mine, right? This business is mine, which I think makes it even harder to say, would you do this piece of it? Or would you help with this piece? Yeah. Because it's connected to my identity. It's connected to me.
Right. It's one thing when you're, perhaps working for somebody or in a large corporation and you're a manager and have to delegate, but if it's your own business and you're handing over your baby to somebody to do stuff, I know a lot of people are, just you're hesitant to do it. There's so much fear and lack of trust.
Yes. The relationships that I build help reduce that fear. So if I am in relationships that I have trust and acceptance and pieces of my heart connected to pieces of their heart, then I'm going to be more likely to say, will you help me? The thought that I have to get rid of is, no, they can't, right? Because I have to do it all myself. But those are beliefs. Those are stories that we tell ourselves.
Yep. Yeah. And we're great at seeing other people's stories, but not always our own.
Exactly.
And I really see it also because, a lot of us are coaches, and we build trust with other people when they're clients, and we know that about relationships, that they require trust, but we don't necessarily apply that when it comes to ourselves, and we need to build other relationships, not just with our clients, but with colleagues, and to build a team. I know so many people who are afraid to scale their business. They need to hire people, but they're terrified to hire anybody.
Right. Because of all those reasons that we just got done talking about, The emotional intelligence has those 4 components, right? Self-awareness, other awareness, self-management, which really is important in terms of, do my feelings manage me, or do I manage my feelings? Yep. And then relationship building, which I think is probably to me the biggest part of me being aware of my own emotional intelligence, is how do I build trust in these relationships and allow them close enough to help me? So we're back to that same process. When I teach building relationships, people think I'm going to teach, tell them about yourself, talk all about you, tell them about your business, get them engaged that way. And what I really teach is what I call the emotional intelligence trifecta. So what I teach is, no, you don't talk and you don't problem solve with them. And this is what you do. You listen to them. You profoundly listen to them. You ask them powerful questions, and then you have empathy. Those 3 pieces right there will build a relationship with that other person that is based in trust, because you are focusing on them and you are bringing them in.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we're not, as a culture, even when we think we are, we're not great listeners. We think we have to do something.
Of course, we have to. Well, and we have gender pieces in there too, right? So men have to solve our problems, but I could almost do a half day in my trainings just on listening.
Yeah. Because
everybody says to me, Deb, I am an excellent listener. And then I put them in a listening exercise, and they look at me like, what? What happened here? There's a coach. Oh, who is he? And what he says is, we have monkey mind. Our minds are going all the time.
Yeah.
And if we don't slow our minds down, we don't listen.
That's so true.
My opinion, Audrey, is it is the gift. It is the gift that we give each other, is that art of listening.
Because it really requires listening to understand, and to trust. And that trust goes both ways. But I think you're so right. Somebody will say something and your mind just starts whirling with ideas, and we're all idea people. And the next thing you know, you haven't heard a word the other person said.
Exactly. I'm thinking about my experience, right, and what I know, and so the listening doesn't happen. I raised a son, and I've been a therapist forever, and now a coach, and he is quite often reminding me about my listening skills, or my lack thereof, right? My lack thereof.
Yes. Yeah. That's funny, because I talk a lot about needing to see our blind spots, and of course, one way to do that is to work with a coach. But sometimes we can get a clue about our blind spots by looking at what we're, dealing with in other people. The client that is the most difficult for you is sometimes because they're mirroring what you need to work on.
You got it. Whether we call that projection or whether we call that other names, right? Other psych names. Of course, what I don't believe this 100% of the time, but I do believe that I bring people into my life to learn the lessons. Yes. Right? Yeah. And if I'm open to that, I can learn those lessons.
Yep. And that's so true. I mean, it's like another analogy I've used is, years ago when I was in my 20s, when you'd be dating somebody and you thought he was wonderful, but your friends knew he was a jerk. Sometimes your friends know before you do. So
yes.
Getting feedback, again, from people we trust, people who know us, um, is important to help us see what we're not seeing. And that takes courage. And I think courage is another piece of emotional intelligence. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
100% it's true. Because in the example you just said, right, if I am willing, right, to be vulnerable enough to
Mm-hmm.
ask someone else how they see me,
Mm-hmm.
that I trust that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a gift that they give me. And that's information that I need. So
Yeah.
it's a lot about vulnerability and a lot about courage.
Right. And it's just common sense. You don't walk up to a stranger and ask somebody, one, they won't know you, and two, you haven't built that relationship. But for people that you have that relationship with, that's a great place to get feedback and to practice listening.
Yep. And it's my close friends I do that with.
Yeah.
It's my close friends I do. And sometimes I have a couple colleagues that I can do that with also. But it's scary. It's scary to put yourself out there like that, you know?
It is.
But the knowledge that we receive in doing that is really important. It's really important.
So, we talk about listening. We need to listen to ourselves and we need to listen to other people. Can you actually teach listening?
It's a great question. People ask me all the time, really, Deb, if I'm not emotionally intelligent, can you help? Of course you can teach listening. Of course you can teach listening. Listening is actually one of the easiest to teach because it's a process of getting rid of what's in the way of me listening and being present. And I can practice that. I can practice that a lot until I understand what getting rid of what's going on in my head and being present with you is. So Audrey, not the trade-off, but the result is my valuing of you, and you can feel that, right? Yeah. So there's a perk, there's big rewards to me learning how to listen because it feels really, really good in the relationship.
This is going to sound like the corniest thing I've ever said, but it's like giving a gift to both the other person and to yourself.
Beautiful. And it's not corny, it's spot on. It is. And again, it's a skill where we all think we do it regularly. We're listeners. And by the time I get done teaching it, it's like, oh man, I am not a good listener. I got to work on this. So, yeah.
And the other piece of it is we're always growing. So we're getting better. Even if we're a good listener, we can be an even better listener, even if that's one of our strengths. Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about emotional intelligence is that you grow. It's not like, okay, I read this book and I learned these skills, I'm done now. We're evolving all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. In some of my trainings that I teach, I have an assessment that I use that is with the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence, and it gives them a profile of those four places, right? Those four quadrants. And sometimes in my trainings, I ask the people who have scored fairly high in, like, let's say, emotional self-awareness to come forward and teach that part. And watching that is magical because it's what you're saying. They look, they think, well, how did this? Oh, I know how this happened. So they pay a lot of attention to how they grew up, what did they learn where, and how did they get to this place that works for them. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I think it's especially powerful because, people, like I said, sometimes they'll make excuses like, oh, she teaches this, so she's good at it, but, I couldn't do it. But listening to people who have, accomplished a lot and grown is so important because it is a skill you can learn.
It is a skill. There isn't, the assessment that I use has 26 what we call competencies. There isn't a skill there that you can't learn. Right? The biggest one that people say is you can't learn to be empathetic. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can learn to get out of yourself enough to pay attention and be respectful of the other in a way that values them. You can do that. You can learn how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are, we talk about personality being fixed and IQ being fixed, but emotional intelligence is a skill.
It is a skill, and it's a behavior, and we can change behaviors. We can learn to do it differently. And I mean, I've been 10 years at this process now, where I just gratefully watch people change. how they are in the world. And the most wonderful piece of this is that when I work with organizations or entrepreneurs, or they take that home to their families.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden their families are listening better, right? Or their families have more empathy or are more present. So it's a skill that just sort of grows exponentially.
Oh yeah, that's so true. It's such a great domino effect, because emotional intelligence is not just work related. It's your whole life. And if you improve a skill in one area, it's going to generalize to other areas.
Yeah. In one of my classes that I just did, they got the profile, and I was talking about all the pieces, and a gentleman at the table put his hand up, and he said, "So can my wife take this, and can we talk about it later?" And I said, "Of course, right?
Yeah.
Of course." It's a tool that everybody, once they see it, they go, "Oh, I get this. This is about my kids and my family, and not just my coworkers or my business partners."
Yeah. And it's, I think it's in in our culture right now. I mean, it's on the cover of Time magazine. It's everywhere, how 80% of, I think they quote, 80% of success is related to, emotional intelligence, not intellect, not talent, not who you know.
That's right.
It's really about being able to be self-aware, manage yourself, manage your relationships. And again, that's a skill, and it affects, as entrepreneurs, we have to care about the bottom line. And it directly affects our bottom line.
You bet it does. Yeah. It's whether I'm networking, right, as an entrepreneur, whether I'm going to conference, as I'm building my business, what I want is for people to value me, because if they value me, they'll value my business.
Yeah.
So me being very emotionally intelligent matters, because I will build that relationship with them, and that will move us forward.
Right. Even if you're not talking about, team leadership or people who are working for me, it's just as relevant to the clients I work with. My being emotionally intelligent affects my relationship with people who want to hire me.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I sit on more and more hiring panels, and I help more and more solopreneurs look at who do they want to bring into their company, right?
Yeah.
They can say educated and smart and, da da da. And then I just have to say, okay, so give me a different picture here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they are educated and smart, but what do you really want? Wow, Deb, I want to be able to trust them.
Oh, so true.
Okay.
Okay, trick question. How many times have you heard somebody say something like, "Oh, they're really smart and they're really good at their job, but they can't get along with anybody else on the team"?
That's not a trick question. It happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
It happens all the time, because it doesn't matter how smart the team is. It matters if individual members in the team have good interpersonal skills.
Right.
That's how it matters. And if they don't, they will disrupt the team completely.
Right. And of course you have to give people the opportunity to, learn them if they're willing to look at their behavior in the team. So that's maybe a good question for you. Let's say you have somebody who isn't a team player, who's really disruptive, but they're smart, they're technically good. Can you improve them? Can you improve their emotional intelligence? How do you approach them?
Okay. Just to be truly honest, I don't approach them. Their managers approach me. Right. So their manager lets me know that there's a member or a couple members of this team that are disrupting the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I get them here because their managers are saying, you need to go talk to Deb about emotional intelligence, right? So that works, because then they know what they're in for.
Yeah.
Either Audrey, they will work with me because they are starting to get it, right? Mm-hmm. Because I start with self-awareness, and because I'm really clear that this is a set of skills that has to be there for success.
Mm-hmm.
Or they won't. And if they won't work with me, and their skill set is good, right? Let's say they're a really good IT person, then maybe this business can find a place for them, not in a team.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, and it's very seldom, I call a manager and I say, I don't think this is going to work, because they really don't care about relationships and they really don't want to build trust. They just want to do their job. So that's rare, very rare, but it happens.
It happens.
Mostly, go ahead.
No, go.
Mostly they come in knowing that not that they're in trouble, but that something isn't working. It just isn't working. And I get to say, this is what isn't working. It's as simple as a manager. I've worked with one for a while, walking down a hall without his face in his phone. Right? And those behaviors can change easy. I can just say to that person, when you sit in that team, when you walk down that hall, don't look at your phone.
Yeah.
Make eye contact with these people. Say hi. Ask them how they are. Stuff that we sort of take for granted, but isn't for granted.
Yeah, sometimes we're just not aware of how we're coming across to other people.
Right. And as much as you and I say valuing relationships is unbelievably important, I don't think that's as prevalent an idea as, quotes, emotional intelligence, right?
Yep.
Because what I believe, it's in my relationships that I grow.
Yeah.
Right? That's how that works. So I sometimes have to convince people that things will go better if they know how to do relationship.
Yeah, and at least to be aware that it's a piece of it. Some people, for example, might be better working really as isolated as possible, but they still have to interact a little bit. So if they know where their talents lie and where they don't lie, they can at least, that is a form of awareness, and they can try and maximize their skill set. Where am I going to fit in best?
Yes. The other part of emotional intelligence that comes into my office all the time, or that I work with when I'm coaching in the field, be it organizations, families, or solopreneurs, right, is do I manage my emotions in a way that doesn't get in my way?
Yeah. Oh.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a triple extrovert. I have big energy, and thus my feelings are oftentimes big. So I had to learn. Every time I teach this, I learn that. Can they see me?
Yeah, we'll be
okay.
Yep.
So here's me, right? And here are my feelings. So I'm in charge of those feelings.
Right.
Here's me, and here are my feelings, and they're in charge of me. And if they're in charge of me, there's going to be trouble. There's just going to be trouble.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because we think, we're not just talking about managing what somebody might call negative emotions. Sometimes it's still about managing positive emotions, and still being in control of ourselves, and making our emotions work for us.
Yes, instead of against us. And if those emotions, and we have all been around people, right, whose emotions are in charge of them.
Yeah.
Whether it's our dad or our mom or a coworker or a friend, we've been around those people, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And there isn't anything that can get accomplished if those feelings are in charge.
Right. It's almost like being an adolescent again. It's think about a teenager.
Yep. Good point. Yep. Yeah. Now, here's what is true. Sometimes if I am in the privacy of my home, or if I am at a gym punching a punching bag, I can work those feelings, right? I can let those feelings be bigger, because sometimes that feels good. Yeah. But what I know is when my feelings get bigger than me, I scare people.
Huh.
And
so
I don't want to scare people.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So it's not saying your emotions are good or bad, but it's being very self-aware of how people are reacting to you.
Yes.
And you get to manage that if you're aware.
Yeah. And especially, if I'm a boss, right? If I'm hiring people in my as an entrepreneur, or if I'm in a team, I have to manage those feelings.
Yeah.
And I have to hire people that manage their feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise the stereotype happens. Somebody blows in a meeting, or in that kind of stuff. So I look the hiring part of what I do is getting more and more interesting and more fun, because they're bringing me in the hiring panel as, does this person have emotional intelligence or don't they, right? And the first thing is, we all know that being hired is you're on your best behavior.
Right.
But I get to ask those kinds of questions, like, how do you deal with conflict? Like, if you have a person on your team and they're not working well, what do you do? So I get to ask those, what one of the guys told me is my mushy questions. Just see if these people know how to be real.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So what kind of questions do you ask to gauge somebody's emotional intelligence?
I will ask them if they have had something wrong happen to them, at their job, and how did they express it? How did they deal with it? So that's a primary question. I ask them how they deal with conflict, to give me their way of dealing with conflict, right? I'll ask them if one of their people is in trouble, looks like they've had a bad weekend or a bad day or whatever. What do they do? What do they do? Do they just ignore it? Do they actually check in? I'll ask them, it's really simple. Tell me how you build relationships. Tell me how you do that. You're going to come into this business. Tell me how you are going to build relationships with these people in a way that they will respect you and trust you. And it stops them dead initially, because they've not asked those kind of questions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you're used to getting asked more technical questions in an interview about your skill set for that business, not necessarily about your emotional intelligence.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's so smart.
Well, and without question, we can say businesses grow and thrive because they are emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
We know it. The research says it, right? So even if I'm the only person in my business, which right now I am, I need to be, right? Emotionally intelligent to be able to go out in the world and have these people out here help build my business, because that's what I want.
Oh, for sure. And it just affects, like we said, every aspect of our lives.
Yeah. I've been in a solopreneur, one job or another, one career or another, for almost 40 years. And I know, had I not gotten out of my office, I ran a women's professional network in the early 80s. I did all kinds of things that I now know were about building relationships, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's then how I built my business. That's how I built my business.
Right. And when we need support, because we're struggling or we're, grappling with something and we need help, being able to ask for help and support is a piece of emotional intelligence. And not that, I don't want to look bad to somebody else. Right. That's our emotions getting in the way of us asking for help.
A little bit sideways, and I know we're close to time, but
that's okay.
I can ask for help. Learning versus knowing, right? If I am in a learning organization and I am part of a team of learners, then it's safer to ask for help, because in that learning environment, I can also say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'll find it out. Versus a knowing organization where you have to always be on top of things. Yeah. You have to always know things, and asking for help is not really allowed because it makes you look too vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting.
The environment around you for people to learn.
Yeah, and so it's knowing where to put yourself too. Part of emotional intelligence for me is knowing too who I want to be around. What work environment do I want to be in? Who do I want to work with, associate with? All those things to me are a piece of emotional intelligence.
Hugely. And I will tell you, Audrey, when I was young, I didn't know those questions or those answers.
No.
Not a clue. I didn't use judgment to really look at relationships. I just did relationships, and got in trouble a fair amount of time because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. 100% right.
Yeah, it's certainly a growth process once you decide to look at yourself, look at your emotions. And I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it is so sad to me to see people who are struggling with fear and insecurity. They may be great listeners, but their other emotions are getting in their way. Their relationship with themselves.
Bingo. Which is the first place of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first place of work is to build that relationship with myself. And I just, in knowing you briefly, I know what you and I do is we create really safe places for people to be able to explore, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's going to look at fear, it better be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it's going to be 10 times as scarier, and you're going to have a potentially negative experience that's going to make you more hesitant, and that's not what we want, obviously.
Right. That's right. Plus, I will put my other hat on, right or wrong, right now.
Oh, please.
If those internal messages are getting so much in my way that I can't be successful, then I probably need more than a coach.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably ought to go see a therapist who can just sort of help me figure out where I got those, how they got in my way, and how do I get rid of them.
Yeah, and they become like anything else, a habit. So part of emotional intelligence is learning how to create better routines, better habits. And again, yeah, and self-awareness, even just being able to say, I'm afraid, but that's a fear and an emotion that may not even be based in reality.
Bingo. Right. Exactly right. So then again, right, we have our upbringing and we have the stories that we tell ourselves. And if you have a safe place to sort of take that apart, I said to over the phone, I said to an actual CEO this morning, so this is a really simple exercise, do it or not. I want you to put down all that self-talk that's negative on the left side of the paper. I mean, everybody's done this at some point, right? Just, I don't care if it takes 20 pages, just write down, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, all that stuff. And then on the right side of the page, I want you to counter every one of those with not what you know from your history, but just what you know about you.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, you can do that.
Yeah.
So again, right? Fear and anxiety.
Yeah. That's so interesting. When you were just saying that, I thought about the analogy. Well, it's not, I don't know if it's an analogy or not, but I still work a lot in the medical field, and what, the big thing we talk about is now, evidence-based medicine, and so we need to come up with a term for evidence-based confidence, because really what we're doing is we're looking at all these negative thoughts, counteracting them with evidence, with facts.
Very good.
And you can't argue with facts, or at least you should.
No, but until you point that out, they believe that left-hand column is the facts.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Right.
We've told the story so many times, we believe it.
Exactly.
And then it gets ingrained.
Oh, and it believes it until somebody challenges it. Somebody like you or me who says, wait a minute. One of my open questions that happens all the time is, where the heck did that come from?
Yeah.
You weren't born that way.
Right.
Yeah. Who told you that? How did you learn that? And how can you unlearn it? Right. That's the beautiful growth place of emotional intelligence, is that self-awareness place. Right.
And I think this is going to sound funny, but I think we have to learn to accept that we're wrong, because so many times people will say, to me, no, I really am incompetent, or I really am not good at this. And I'm like, don't fight for your limitations. Be wrong.
Good. Very good.
Be wrong. Accept being wrong. You are,
I love it.
We want to hold on to it. And again, that's a piece of self-awareness, emotional intelligence. And I love that you said about creating a safe space, because that's really my desire, is to create a safe place and safe relationships. I can't tell you how many times I've had, I value the close relationships, for example, I have with my coach, because I'll make up stories, oh, she thought this was a really stupid thing I did, or I shouldn't have done that. And we have such a good relationship that I can go, what did you think about my post that I thought was like the worst post I ever posted? And she'll be like, I thought it was great. Where did you come up with that?
I have a coach also that does that for me.
Yeah. And you need
wonderful,
that.
right? It's wonderful.
Oh, it's such a blessing to be able to, somebody used this term, and I've used it before, reality test what we think, someone else is really thinking. And 99.9% of the time, anything negative is coming from us, not them.
Correct.
And it's very interesting to me when somebody is really actually being negative, you usually know it. They're not hiding it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's when you've got no evidence that you make up stories.
Right. That's that's a whole nother masterclass, right? Which is how we make up stories. In Crucial Conversations, they talk about that, right? In that book.
Absolutely. And
check out your stories.
And it's so interesting. As people, as human beings, we hate mysteries. So we want to know, we want control. So when there's something going on and we don't know why, we make it up. Exactly. And we're usually wrong, but we make it up. We want to believe we know what the other person thought or did. Why didn't they call us back? Why didn't they hire me? A million things. And we make up stories.
Yes. And all of this in a big picture has nothing to do with what your education is, if you have your Ph.D. or not. We haven't talked about that at all in this time that we've been together. No, it's all who am I and how am I as a human being with you.
Yeah, and I have seen, as I'm sure you have, I'm sure 90% of or more of our listeners have, known brilliant people who failed.
That's right.
Because they couldn't finish the book they were writing, or they couldn't finish their degree, or they, were too afraid to go out and speak to people, whatever it was. It's never their intelligence that got them in trouble.
Never.
It's their emotional intelligence.
And especially for entrepreneurs, right? All those things. I don't have a manager telling me what to do, right? I'm it, right? Yep. So I got to step into this. I got to step into this gunk a little bit to figure it out so that I can really be who I want to be in the world.
Yeah. And we talk about leadership and we have to lead ourselves. It's not just about the other people we're leading, quote unquote. Yep. We have to have an internal leader as well.
It's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah.
That is still a piece that is difficult to teach. But I got to know this before I can even begin to have a healthy relationship with you.
Yeah.
And both of those are about emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love the work. I love the concepts. When Daniel Goleman finally just said, I'm going to write a simple book about this, right? So that everybody can understand it. I went, Yahoo!
It's about time. Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly.
I'm so grateful that we did this. This was just so much fun, and we're just on the same page. But I do want to take a minute because you also have some stuff for our listeners on your website, and I wonder if you could take just a minute and tell people about that.
The free white paper?
Yeah.
It's how do I do this? It's all the business stuff we know is better if you're emotionally intelligent. Mm-hmm. So it talks about leadership and how leadership works, how it makes, like employee retention is one of those pieces, right?
Oh yeah.
People are going to stay with me, whether I'm in an organization or an entrepreneur, because of my relationship with them, right? And because I built trust and built bonds. So it's a really nice list of what has to be there for those really big things to happen, like retention. Yep. So that's what that paper is about. I use it in all my trainings because it goes, okay, let's get really clear about how emotional intelligence actually helps the system work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned turnover, because we might not think of turnover as being related to emotional intelligence, but employee turnover is a huge profit loss for people.
Exactly. So is employee engagement, right? I mean, they sit right next to each other. Because if I am committed to my business, be it entrepreneur or system, right? If I am committed to that, I'm going to be able to move forward. If I'm disengaged, I don't care. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, and as an entrepreneur, I don't even like that I say this. I'm like 100% responsible, 95% responsible for that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about me.
Yeah.
Because it's about me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. And I really appreciate the enthusiasm as well as the information you
Very
brought
well
to
done.
the
I hope
interview.
they go to my website and just check it out because it's fun.
Oh, that's
Very,
wonderful.
very fun spending time with you.